What does it feel like when you dive?
It feels like when you're having a good dive, just like pure zen. Like the sensation of free falling, I guess people say, is like the closest thing to like feeling like you're in space, because there is no gravity. You are just like in a complete zen state, sinking to the bottom of the ocean, which I love. It sounds quite scary, I guess, when you say it, like, oh, I'm just sinking to the bottom of the ocean. But yeah, it's just a feeling of like complete peace, and just like, it's like addictive, like the feeling of like, and I think there's this like misperception of like freediving as being this like ultra high risk sport, which I guess, I mean, you're holding your breath underwater, so it's not like actively safe, but it's not, if done with like, the number one rule in diving is like never dive alone, so you always have someone safetying you. So it's actually very safe if done in a controlled environment where you have the right safety and you're diving with people you trust. So yeah, you are just kind of like trying to push it to the next level, like I guess you do in any sport.
You recently broke an Irish record.
Yes.
Can you tell us about that and about the sport of freediving itself? Like, you know, what it is, how you got into it.
Yeah, so I guess how I got into it was quite trivial. I was in Koh Tao travelling, and I just wanted to hold my breath longer to swim with the fish. And I saw, you know, everyone does scuba diving. I've never actually done scuba diving, and I saw this school and I was like, I'll give that a go. My first experience was horrific. Normally in a level 1 course, I know now, they'll swim down with you face to face, almost like invasively so that you feel like you're with someone and it feels safe. And also there's so many like mechanics and like chemistry with breathing. So the biggest like misconception, I guess, with the urge to breathe is that when you feel like you need to breathe, it's because you're low on oxygen, and like you're like, I need oxygen, but actually your urge to breathe is completely triggered by CO2. So rising CO2 in your body is what gives you the urge to breathe. So if you were to put like one of those little oxygen things on your finger and take a breath, hold your breath, and then when you're like, oh my God, I need to breathe, if you look at that, your oxygen sats will still be 99%.
Wow.
It's just that rising CO2 level. So nobody told me any of this information. So I was swimming down, so you swim down on a line, and I got to like 3 meters and I was like, I need to breathe. And I was coming up in a panic, and your man was just like, you don't need to breathe. And I was like, John, that's really not helpful information. Like,
Actually,
why?
I do.
I feel like I do, John. So like,
one of the
can you give me
basics.
some sort of like help? So that actual experience was horrendous. And then I got to the Philippines and I did a bit of fun diving. So like, just like going down to 8-10 meters with like shipwrecks and things like that, and like the fish, and seeing like, you see like Nemos in real life. And then it just kind of escalated. So then I did more and more courses, and then I was traveling around New Zealand last year, I think it was last year, and I was on the way back to Ireland, but I just wasn't ready yet. And I went to this school in Bali to do what they call like a master's. So it's like a month-long intensive, you're training 3 days on, 1 day off. And I just fell in love with it from there, and got more and more. Every time you go deeper, you're like, I want to go to 20 meters, and then you go to 20 and you're like, oh, let me go to 30. And then I actually made really good friends with the owners of the school there, and they kind of the reason that I went back, because I was like, I miss them, I want to spend more time with them. And then yeah, it's all just kind of snowballed quite aggressively from there.
I suppose freediving itself is, just for anyone who hasn't heard of it before, can you explain it to us?
Freediving itself, so there's two sides to freediving. There's depth freediving and pool freediving. And then depth diving, there's 4 disciplines. So there's free immersion, where you pull, it's almost like a rope climb, so you pull down and up on a rope. There's no fins, which is when you swim down, so it's like a breaststroke style swimming technique. Then there's bifins, which is when you use the 2 fins to go down. And then there's monofin, which is the one I got my world record in, my national record in, I wish, which is like the big mermaid style fin.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, there's 4 different disciplines, and you are just in depth diving. It's in a competition, whoever swims the deepest wins.
So it's more on the depth rather than how long you hold your breath.
Yeah. It's not an open line in a competition. So the night before, you say, I'm going to do this dive to 60 meters and it's going to take me this long.
Okay.
And you tell you how long, because there's safety divers. So when you're on the way back up, the safety divers will dive down and they'll meet you at about 30 meters for my depth. If you're doing 100 plus, someone with a scooter will meet you at like 40 meters. And that's to allow them to know, okay, how do we time ourselves to get down so that we meet her when she's on the way up? And that's just for safety in case anything does happen on the way up. My national record dive was 61 meters, which was a PB as well, dive. And I actually nearly didn't do the dive because I've been having stomach problems, and like 2 hours before the dive, I was like lying in bed crying on FaceTime to my coaches in Bali, being like, I can't do it. And one of my coaches is Argentinian, and she's like, fucking no bullshit. And she's like, bitch, get up. She's like, go out there. And she was like, even if you only do 10 meters, I'll be proud of you. And I was like, okay. And then that was making me cry more. And then when you cry, you get really congested.
Oh gosh.
So then she's like, stop crying, you're not going to be able to
Not good for
equalize.
breathing.
Yeah. So I actually went out to that dive and I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to go. Nothing's going to happen. The dive's going to be a shit show. And I was then like a combination, like frustrated because that was the dive that I was going for the national record. And the whole year had been building to this dive. And then I felt so sick that I was like hysterically crying on the boat beforehand, being like, God hates me, like da-da-da. So I got in the water with like expectations like -10. I literally was just like, fuck it, let's go and see what happens. And then I did it and I was like, ah!
Breathe.
I'm okay.
Keep breathing, keep breathing, keep breathing.
Good fast surface protocol. Yeah.
Super fresh.
No expectations is like the most important thing you can have, which is so hard to train. And I'm still trying to like find that balance of like, you obviously, people say you shouldn't have depth goals, but it's like you need a goal to work towards, but then also like being detached enough from the goal that like if it doesn't happen there's always another dive. And it was like only my second ever competition and it was a world championship, so it was a lot of like I said, like you're trying to calm yourself before a dive and it's really hard when you have like hundreds, like there's like 50 people staring at you, watching you, like, and you're like, oh, it's like quite like intimidating, and you're surrounded by like the world's top divers who are all going, like one of the a guy did a new world record of like, I can't remember what it was, 120 something meters. And like you're diving with these people and I'm like, hello, like, little old me.
Yeah, you.
What do you mean?
I'm going.
Did you swim a lot back when you were a child living in Ireland? Like, do you have kind of a good relationship with the sea already?
So I'm very lucky, my dad's from Mayo, so we have a holiday home down there.
Okay.
So from the age of like 7, my mum would like pack up the car before school. When we were the last day of school, she'd pack up the car, she'd collect us from school, and we wouldn't go back until the day before we went back to school. So I spent a lot of the time down there surfing, throwing myself off cliffs. We had a rib, so we were able to go banana boating, water skiing, all that stuff. So I spent a lot of time in the water. I hate saying I'm quite aquatic. It's such a cringy phrase.
She's a water baby.
Yeah, I'm a mermaid, but I'm not a swimmer. It's interesting actually. So I dive in Bali most of the year and the water's really warm. It's obviously like 29 degrees, the water, and it's kind of pretty steady the whole way down. In the Mediterranean, they have thermoclines. So in Cyprus, the water temperature on the surface was like 27, and then when you got between 30 and 40, it dropped to 21.
Wow.
So that's actually a big problem for people because, like I said, like it's all about relaxation and really the moment you tense anything. And obviously you have that thing when you get in cold water, your body goes, ooh. And even though 21 degrees isn't objectively cold, it's like the shift in temperature from 27 to 21 is quite dramatic. And it didn't affect me at all. And I'm honestly convinced it's from the Irish Sea. Just because I've been going in my whole life. So it's like, even though I'm like objectively, I'm fucking freezing, I don't get that like tense. But I'm not a swimmer. Like I was saying to you earlier, like I can't actually swim. I can swim, but I can't swim. So if you know, I can tread water and things, but I can't actually like swim. So that's on the goal now for winter. I'm going to get a swimming coach and learn how to swim.
Brilliant.
You obviously have no fear then, because most people who wouldn't be like super confident swimming, the thought of going, 40 meters underwater would be terrifying.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I think I probably don't have, what's the word? Like a fear complex, yeah. And when I was younger, like I was always kind of like trying to keep up with the boys. So like, I'd be like 10 and like the 14-year-old boys would like throw themselves off the cliff in the way and my mom would be like, don't you dare. And I'd be like, woo! So yeah, but in freediving you do get those days, like some days you'll dive down and you'll be fine, and then other days for whatever reason, even sometimes around your period where your hormones are all over the place, I can get panicky. And especially on the first dive, every time. The first dive, you're on the way down, you get to 10 meters, you're like, fuck this. I want to bail, I don't want to do this, why am I doing this? Sometimes you're down, then you do get panicky. But that's when it all comes to like freediving, such a mental sport. It's obviously physical, but it's I would say 80% mental, and just how you control those intrusive thoughts and like tell them to go away rather than like engaging with them, if that makes sense. And I'm quite have an active brain, so when I'm doing, I'm fine. So when I'm like, I never get an urge to breathe. If I'm like, my dive time for my record, for example, was about 2 minutes. I have no urge to breathe in that dive. I'm having a great time. If you try to get me to do a static where I'm holding my breath for 2 minutes in water, the whole thing is torture, because it's just you and your thoughts, and you have to get really good at just not getting your perception of time to change and everything, which I've not quite mastered.
Yeah, because I was going to ask you how long can you hold your breath for, but for you it's more about the depth than the actual time.
Yeah, I've only ever done static breath holds for the courses. So for the different levels you have to do, there's minimum requirements. So my longest is 3 minutes 40. But
Oh
I
my
did.
gosh.
God,
I
that's
only
long.
but it's not long. The world record for women is 9 something, which is wild.
Staying still, standing.
Just, yeah, it's crazy. But yeah, for me, I don't even engage with it because it's not helpful for me. I think eventually I might have to when I get deeper and my breath holds get longer. It's probably something I should train. At the moment, I'm quite bad for picking and choosing what I train.
It's a form of meditation, so
Mm-hmm.
really, is it? Like if you're trying to keep your mind that still.
Yeah. So your brain uses up, I'm making up a number here, but it's something around 30 or 35% of your oxygen reserves are from like your thoughts and your brain activity. So when you're going down, for the first 20, 30 meters, you're kicking quite hard to beat what's called like the buoyancy. So once you get to about 15 meters, your lungs are shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. And then after about 15, 20 meters, you then become what's called like negatively buoyant. So you'll then begin sinking.
Wow.
So then after about 30, 35 meters, I'll then go into what's called free fall. So at that point, you're just completely still. And that is just about quieting your mind and just really focusing on your equalization and just trying to like, because sometimes your brain starts going, oh, and you start thinking, and then you build up tension automatically, and then the tenser you get, the harder it is to equalize. And once you can't equalize anymore, you have to turn.
How do you know once you've reached the point that you have to turn around? As in, what does it feel like for you?
So for me, it's equalization. So
In your ears.
yes, you know that feeling where you go,
Yeah.
when you're on a plane or something, you need to
Oh,
pop
yeah.
your ears. So as you're going down, you have to keep equalizing. And the deeper you get, the less often you need to equalize because the relative pressure changes less and less. So you can feel the pressure building up in your ears. And if you can't equalize, I mean, and sometimes, you ride your ears a little bit and you wait till the pressure is very intense and then you turn, which is like, they say not to do, but we all do it sometimes. But yeah, you do. It's the pressure building in your ears where if you were to keep going, you'd explode your eardrum if you can't equalise.
Okay. I suppose in Ireland specifically, the public, probably our perception of freediving is maybe a little bit skewed
for
by
sure.
the documentary
Yeah.
and kind of the heartbreak that we see
Yeah,
in
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Did that shake the diving community? And I mean, I know you're not based here, but I
Yeah.
presume you know some of the diving community here as well. Did that kind of send a ripple through, or
I think that happened a long time ago now. I think that was 2017.
Probably before you
So it was
started.
before I even did. I did my first freediving course a few months before that came out, actually.
Wow.
But when it came out, I had a lot of people being like, oh, you shouldn't be doing that. Da, da, da. I'm like,
Yeah.
guys, chill, it's fine. Because especially I think there's a lot of misunderstanding like that. That whole documentary really shows like the drama and the blackouts and makes the blackouts look quite dramatic. And blackouts actually like in themselves aren't inherently dangerous. So all that's happening when you're blacking out, and they mostly happen in the last 10 meters, is that your oxygen levels get to a point where you're quite low on oxygen and your body goes, right, let's shut down our brain for a little bit until we have more oxygen. So as long as you're with someone and they take you to the surface on time and you recover on the surface, like it's not a, what's the word? There's no like long-term ramifications that we know of, there might be, but of that actually happening. The danger is if you black out and you're alone. If you black out and there's no one to save you, you're going to die. There's actually like way more, like blacking out's probably the least thing that I'm worried about.
Wow.
Diving, there's a lot more things like barotrauma, so you can have like what's known as like a lung squeeze. So if you're not adapted to the depths that you're diving, or you make any sudden movements, or you're too tense at depth, you can like actually really damage your lungs, and you can have like what's called like a squeeze. And it's where like the tissue and you get like blood and stuff, and that's actually what I'm most worried about when I'm diving. I've never had any injuries, thank God. I've never had a blackout, I've never had anything. But that's actually the bigger risk, with people just think in their head, oh, blackout, and it actually does look really scary. Someone blacked out in a buoy when I was there once.
Yeah, because
So
it's
when you
one thing
then-
I wanted to ask you after watching the documentary was, have you ever blacked out? Like, is it as common?
It is common when people start pushing their limits, and when people are doing like on the verge of like, especially people doing 100+ meter dives, blackouts become more common. But it's not something you strive for, and the whole point of training is you get better at kind of noticing what those limits are and like the subtle signs of hypoxia. And so many things you could do a dive one day and feel amazing, and then because of sleep or dehydration or all these different things, that same dive a few days later, you could be actually a bit hypoxic on the surface. Nerves, if you accidentally hyperventilate, that can cause people to black out too. If they're really nervous and it's their first competition and they think they're relaxation breathing beforehand, but they're actually hyperventilating, then that can cause that as well. But no, I've never blacked out, and it's not really, it's funny, because my limitation at the moment is my equalization. I'm nowhere. I've never even been like mildly hypoxic at the end of a dive. And I joke sometimes, I'm like, oh, I can't wait for the day that blacking out is my limiting factor, because it's really frustrating when your EQ is blocking you and you're like, oh, I have so much more in me, but you can't go deeper because of that. So I'm like, one day that will be my block. And people say you're going to regret saying that, because it's harder to fix your hypoxic limits than it is your EQ problems. But
How do you train now to get deeper?
yes, well, this is where I've kind of been raw dogging it a bit in that I do depth training. So I have coaches in Bali and I train with them. And when I'm there, I'm training 3 days on, 1 day off. And that's just depth training. So we're doing different styles of training just to get, just like you would when you're running, you would do like sprint sessions and different types of training. We do different trainings in freediving. Some days you might be doing like what's called like FRC dives, which is where you passively exhale. So you exhale like half your air and then you go down, and that lets you simulate deeper depths at shallow depths. So you can like get used to the pressure on your chest, because when you get to 10 meters, for example, the atmospheres have changed, but you've added 1 atmosphere of pressure. So your lungs have actually halved at that point. And then so that's the biggest change in pressure. So if you exhale half your air before you go down at 10 meters, you're actually a quarter of your lung. So then you're really able to kind of train that adaptation. So that's really all I've been doing. There's a lot of dry training that I've been putting off, which I need to start doing, like equalization. It's all about kind of being able to like isolate the different muscles in your mouth. So like your soft palate, your tongue, your larynx, and it's boring and mundane. So I haven't touched it, but like that's why I'm not. I'm at the point now where I have to do it. And then just like things like strength building. I've atrophied so much muscle over the last few months. Up until August, I had a really intense gym program alongside. And then things like swimming, you have like dry EQ lung stretches, like stretching your lungs on land on like full lungs. There's so much and different sides of it, and some of it can be like not sexy and boring, and they're the bits that I've been putting off. So for the winter now, when I'm not depth training, my plan is to start doing EQ training as much as I hate it, and then more like lung stretching and stuff like that.
Do you have to train mentally as well in order to kind of reach that calm state when you're going down?
Yes, you get better at zoning yourself out, and I guess training yourself to be like, this is me, like I'm in diving mode. So like I have a bit of a like pre-dive routine of like 10 minutes before the dive, 5 minutes before the dive, that like I'm doing certain breath work, or I'm just like really getting into, I'm like, nobody fucking talk to me, especially when you're like training and like someone's just finished the dive and they're all chatting and you're like, please don't speak to me, please, because I also get overexcited. And then so you're really just trying to, before the dive, get your heart rate down as much and get yourself into just as much of a relaxed state. And then yeah, just training like intrusive thoughts, which we all have, and it's really hard sometimes. They're there, and just training yourself to not engage with them and just be like, okay, that's an interesting thought I've just had about death while I'm swimming down. Let me just like, and sometimes I do engage with them and I'm like, oh God, I'm panicked, and I'm like coming up and they're like, what happened? I was like, I thought I was going to die. And they're like, okay, you weirdo. So it's just engagement. I do a lot of like altered states of consciousness breath work, which you would never do diving. But it lets you get into, it has the same kind of effects as moderate doses of psilocybin, like mushrooms. And that kind of breath work has changed my life. And it really allows you to get into that Zen state where you can just, and then it's like being like, okay, I can get into that Zen state, and how can I get into that Zen state kind of quicker without getting into that altered state?
Yeah, breathwork is something I really wanted to ask you about, because you're a breathwork facilitator as well, are you?
Yeah.
Where did you do your training?
So I've done many trainings.
Okay.
I'm obsessed with like, I'm like, so 2-3 years ago I was working in like corporate life in London. I was a data scientist, and I was like the least woo-woo spiritual person on the planet. I'd be like, even yoga, I was like, please, like, stop hugging trees. And then I went to Bali and I started doing, I was actually in quite a bad headspace, and I feel like if anyone's ever been in that space, sometimes you're just desperate, you're like, I'll fucking try anything. I was like throwing myself in cold water doing something, and I got to this breathwork class, and I, like I said earlier, have ADHD. I just gotten diagnosed officially, actually. I was 30. It wasn't a shock to anyone that I had ADHD, but like there was so many facets of my life where I was struggling that I didn't know were caused by ADHD. I kind of just like, oh, I'm a bit giddy and scatty, but actually there was so much like emotional dysregulation that was coming with that. And so I'd always kind of put myself in this box of like, oh, I'm not the kind of person who can quiet their mind. Oh no, my mind's too mad. And people were like, have you tried meditation? I'd be like, good luck. Like, so I went to this breathwork class, and you lie down and you go into what's like a circular breath. And oh my God, for the first time in my life, I had like, when I say like just blank head, complete blank head, I was like, this must be what like the monks feel like. And I got really emotional because I was like, oh my God, like my whole life I'd put myself in this box of I'm not someone who can do like X, Y, Z. And it kind of blew, like, it sounds a bit ridiculous, but it kind of blew the glass ceiling off my life, because I was like, where else in my life am I telling myself I'm not the kind of person who does this, I can't do that. And I'd put myself, I think we're all so guilty of like putting ourselves in the box of like, this is who I am, I can't do this, or I'm not that kind of person.
Like, sports teams especially, I suppose, because, you know, a lot of what we do is sports, like the benefit that they could have, you see them, they'd all have a nutritionist, an S&C coach. Would you think that they should have
Well, I'm pretty
a breathwork
sure
facilitator?
I'm pretty sure the Irish rugby team do a lot of breathwork now, more functional breathwork. So a lot of people aren't breathing properly, so they're breathing like when you think to yourself, someone goes, take a deep breath, you go. But actually that's like the opposite of a deep breath. The deep breath is low and slow, and it's into your belly, into your diaphragm, and then expanding your intercostal muscles. A lot of people, because we're constantly slumped over desks and stuff, everyone are breathing into their chest, which is like, if you're not breathing into the deep lobes of your lungs, you're not getting the best oxygen exchange. So yeah, just teaching people how to breathe, but also teaching people, I think, especially Irish people, and I was one of them, we're quite like, Jesus, that's awful woo-woo. My dad even now is like, what the fuck are you playing at? Like, he's like, I'm glad you're enjoying it, but like, get away from me. Like, and I think,
So Irish.
so, yeah, something I really like, and so many people have said it to me before, they're quite shocked when they find out that I'm really into all that shit, because they're like, God, you don't really strike me as someone who would be into that spiritual crystal shite. But I kind of like that, because I'm like, there's a huge demographic that I want to reach, and I'm still figuring out what that is, of people who they want to learn how to breathe better and get out of their heads, but they're not ready for that kind of full spiritual awakening side of things.
Will you base yourself in Dublin now for a while, or are you going back to Bali soon?
I'll be home so the plan is to go to Egypt for a few weeks in November and then be back for Christmas, and then I'll head off to Bali then in the new year to start base training.
And what is next for you, I suppose? Like, obviously you have to get back to training, sort the equalisation stuff out, but then what's your goal in the next coming
My goal
years,
for
months?
next year, what's the goal full stop? I think I can do it next year, is to be the deepest Irish person ever.
Wow, okay.
Which is currently 81 metres, which I think I can do next year if I if I take my equalisation seriously. But yeah, that's the next goal, is to be the deepest Irish person ever.
National record. Irish national record. Whoop whoop.